My name is Tiara Durham, and I'm the Director of Commercialization Programming at the Science Center. And we are a 60-year-old nonprofit focusing on helping health tech and med tech companies commercialize, in addition to a number of other important things, and meeting at the intersection of healthcare, technology, and startups. I'm excited to talk with you today and have this distinguished panel join me to talk about the art and science of de-risking your startup. Just to start out with a few interesting facts that many of you probably already know, but 90% of companies fail. So if you have a startup, or if you're thinking about starting one, it's not the most exciting statistic to start with, right? Knowing that 90% of those companies won't actually make it. 10% of those companies actually fail in the first year. And some of the reasons why they fail is really misunderstanding the market demand, not knowing the market, not understanding the problem that they're solving for. The last panel, if you happen to be here for that panel, actually said something really interesting, which is you have to fall in love or be obsessed with the problem, and I love that. Because if you don't understand the problem you're solving or who you're solving it for, you could be in that 90% bucket. In fact, you most likely will be in the 90% bucket. And then there are a number of hosts of other reasons why companies fail. I think one of the other top reasons is not having access to capital or having the right capital to fuel your business forward. So even if you get the problem right and you get the solution right, if you don't have the capital to scale and fuel your business, you might have some challenges. And so the panel that I have today is going to help you think through what it means and how to de-risk your company to avoid being a part of that 90%. So with that, I want to turn it over to each of them for a brief introduction, and then we'll hop into questions.
Thanks so much, Tiara, and One Philadelphia as well for this amazing opportunity. I'm Kirthika Parmeswaran. I'm the founder and CEO of Vital Start Health. We have the first women's mental health clinic using virtual reality that's completely covered by insurance.
Okay, it works. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you, One Philadelphia, Tiara, for having us here. Dr. Tia Lyles-Williams, founder and CEO of LucasPye BIO, a contract drug manufacturing organization. We're building on 61st and Lindbergh in Southwest Philadelphia. What else are you supposed to say? That was it? All right.
Hey, everybody. My name is Brian Slough. I'm a corporate lawyer with Morgan Lewis here in Philadelphia. I work with startups and venture capital from, beginning to exit and everything in between. I'm, Philly, South Jersey guy. My whole family's in the region. Morgan Lewis is a fun place to work for me because I get to do this work and help entrepreneurs and contribute to the innovation ecosystem. But it's also it's a global firm, and it happens to have been founded and headquartered here in Philadelphia, and it's a bit of a rare thing. So I get a nice vantage point of kind of the ecosystem. I get to work with local companies, very large companies, local investors, up into very large international institutional capital. I really wanted to just kind of jump right into the conversation. I love the point about kind of 90% of startups fail, give or take. Companies can fail, right? Entrepreneurs don't. So that's one of the things I like to keep in mind. A lot of entrepreneurs I see and work with, it's not their first endeavor. It's not their first project. They're sometimes multiple iterations, different ways through it. I see technology and different ways kind of move on to other companies, right, and not just fail and go away. So there's ways that technology and the ideas live on beyond just the failure of the company. And then, there's different ways to look at it. I see teams, right? Founder teams move on, right, into acqui-hires are really big right now. So company goes away, changes, right? Those entrepreneurs, those people that had those ideas, that stuff moves on and keeps going. So just, one thing to keep in mind, the flip side of that failure rate.
Thank you for that, Brian. I think it's an important point. We learn and we grow. Hopefully, with one failure becomes a success, and that's what we learn from are those failures. So thanks for that perspective. I really wanted to focus on, just for the room's sake, when we talk about de-risking, that could mean a lot of things to a lot of people. So I'm curious from our panel, what does de-risk mean to you and your business? And whoever would like to start.
Sure. I think you want to? You're
No,
good?
I was handing you.
So this is a great question, because as you know, as you start a startup and go out there to raise money, that's the first thing they're looking at is what are the risks in your journey and are you going to make it? And only then will somebody want to invest in you. So I'm a Wharton alum, and through the MBA and through the journey, there are many ways to look at risk. There is the SWOT analysis, which is strength, weakness, opportunities, and threats. So you typically start there, even before you start your business, to check if what you're doing can actually be taken to that next level. There are many other, frameworks. There is the Porter's 5 forces and, the 4 Ps. There's so many like this. I can just keep rattling on that. But what I see as a startup and a healthcare digital health startup, keeps going in and out, is 4 things. The first is definitely the pain point. The pain point is huge. You've got to keep an eye on that. The second is commercialization and how are you going to get that market share. The third is processes, because in healthcare, there's a lot of processes and compliance that you have to keep an eye on. And the fourth is people. You need the right people at the right place at the right time. That's so important. That's what I see. When I look at risk, I look at all these areas and how you can overcome the gaps in these areas. So there's more to be followed. Let me give.
I'll go ahead.
Just a quick follow-up. I love to geek out on models, especially when it comes to some of the models that you're referring to in Porter's 5 forces, SWOT analysis, really key elements. So it's interesting that you bring that up. I just want people to keep that in mind as we talk about some of the ways that we de-risk. But Tia and Brian, what are your thoughts on what de-risk means to you?
I think for de-risking, there's a lot of criteria depending on what kind of business, depending on who you are as a founder, depending on what market you're jumping into. For me personally, de-risking had to do a lot of it with who I am and how I present myself. De-risking had a lot to do with how you speak and how you present your project or your startup. And then the other piece of it, de-risking, is doing your research, right? Not just on your market and your business, but the people that you may be asking funding from. You have to do your research to make sure you're right fit in their portfolio, looking at competition, looking at what is their appetite for risk. I'm in biotech with hard science for manufacturing drugs, so the risks that apply to my business are very, very different from the risk of a tech business. The road to get to market is way longer than it is for a tech business. So it all depends on who you are, what your business is, what market you're entering, and how you plan to fund it to get it scaled up.
Yeah, so I completely agree, right, with Tia's point about, when we're talking about risk, very kind of individualized, and depends on the risk we're talking about, right? So I'm a lawyer. I'll talk about kind of the legal risk and give it through that lens a bit. One of the good examples is founder teams, right? Founders, there's often a team that starts. There's sometimes that partners, right? One person kind of comes or goes. Just like companies fail on their statistics around it, right? There's plenty of statistics around a change in a founder team over time, right? What you start with isn't going to necessarily look like what it's going to end with. Right, so there's the risk that founder team is going to change. See, you can't get rid of that risk. That's out there. You can mitigate for it, right, with appropriate contracts, agreements, founder agreements amongst each other, right? That include things like addressing vesting, right? How long are you going to stick around to own your piece of the company? IP assignment, right? That the things you're working on together are going to be owned by the company, even if you leave it. So there's the legal risks, and the way to kind of mitigate against that is, again, is good contracting, right? But there's the broader picture of strategic, right? You can be strategic about how you approach the venture, right? And part of that is just stepping back, thinking sometimes, and acting strategically in your actions, and that's a way to kind of mitigate legal risk, beyond just contracts, right? The paper. There's strategic thinking about how you go about every interaction, whether it be with your co-founder, your investor, your customers, right? Your suppliers, your community organizations. So that's I view that as a way to kind of de-risk, kind of legally, is go about things strategically.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I think what's interesting about you, Brian, is that you have that legal perspective. There are so many ways that we can de-risk, right? So there's de-risking by making sure you understand the problem, which we've talked about, de-risking from a legal aspect, from a product market fit aspect, certainly, from an accounting measure perspective, there's de-risk. Tia, you brought up an interesting point when we met prior in terms of de-risking who you are. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yes, so being the first African American woman to build a drug manufacturing facility is a huge risk in itself, right? Especially for someone that looks like me, talks like me, dressed like me. They're looking at me like, who the hell are you? And so I had to do different things as far as aligning myself strategically with City Council, with Governor Shapiro, with House Rep McClinton, all these different folks to back me and write letters of support, all these different folks to kind of speak my name on my behalf, to kind of make it, y'all know this in the tech industry, any founder industry, right? You got to be kind of like the popular kid to get eyes on your business and get funding attracted to your company. So by me doing those different things, Shapiro came way later than everybody else that I met in the city or the state of Pennsylvania. But when that time came for him to meet with Shapiro, his team already knew who I was. They already knew what I was building. They already wanted to jump in and help out, right? That de-risk it. Obviously, education had to do that too, right? So I got an honorary, I didn't ask for it, but I got honored with an honorary doctorate from Jefferson University, from the Sidney Kendall Medical School. That helps out a lot as well. So there's different things that you can do from a social aspect or social economic aspect, even from a political aspect, to make sure you're in the right place at the right time. I ain't gonna get into politics, but that's similar to how Barack got to where he's at, right? That's similar to where Kamala got to where she was. When I went to Howard, didn't nobody care about Howard University. You knew about Thurgood Marshall, maybe a couple of people. Now that Kamala's there, Howard has a different reputation. Same thing.
Yeah, and I should say, I think it's important to call out the fact that there are areas that we shouldn't have to de-risk, right? We shouldn't have to de-risk who we are. We should be able to come into the room as our whole selves and have people accept and appreciate us for who we are. But I think the important thing about this topic, and that's why it's the art and science, is that there are some scientific things we can do, legal, accounting, product market fit, etc. But there's an art form to knowing who you are, the room that you're walking into, and how people are going to prejudge you before you get there. And I'm glad you brought up education as well, because I know that there are organizations that will look at where you went to school and will say, if the school isn't aligned, if I don't know the alumni, if I don't know who that person is, I can't take a bet on that company. So they will unfortunately choose to pass on proceeding with even understanding how productive or beneficial your product can be to the market if they feel like you don't have the right education, right? Or education from the right location. And so I'm going to add to that is, and this actually is a segue into how do you de-risk. Knowing your market, knowing your audience is a really important component to the first steps that you can take to de-risk. What do they want to know, or what do they need to do in order for you to get the yes that you want, whatever that yes is. So I want to turn it back to you all to say, now that you've kind of defined what de-risking is, what are some of the key steps to how you choose to go about de-risking? You started with some of the tools that you use. Are there other tools in your toolbox for de-risking?
Yes, ask for direct feedback. Every time somebody tells you no on funding or no on an opportunity for an accelerator or no on an opportunity for speaking at a conference, something like that, ask for feedback to see what's going on, but especially with investors, right? So I give y'all a story. I'm not going to say the person's name or an investment company because I plan on going back to them when I'm ready. But when I was in a pre-due diligence that they invited me to, okay, we kept going around in circle and I kept answering the question. So finally I asked the individual, I said, hey, just give it to me straight. What am I missing? You said I need this. I keep bringing these things to you. What else is missing? They told me to my face, I need a white face on my board. Now y'all gasping like, how dare they, right? But the good thing is you gave it to me straight. So, and I kept it in confidence because I want to maintain that relationship, right? But they got me go back to my toolbox, figure out who can I add to this board that's going to give this white face credibility, as they're calling it, for this particular organization. And some of you guys may say that's messed up, but the reality is this is the world we in, right? So if I'm trying to get a certain amount of money, especially in biotech, right, where I'm competing with historical companies that are owned by white men, I got to learn how to play the game and be competitive. And if that's what I need to go get, then that's what I'm going to go get.
Hats off to you, Tia. Being an entrepreneur is about being agile and problem solving. That's how I see it. And really de-risking comes down to problem solving and seeing the truth about your startup. No one else is going to give you the truth. I think she said, this is the real thing. You have to learn to be critical for yourself. You don't have to show that face when you walk into rooms, but you better know what you're doing and what your gaps are so that you can problem solve. One of the big things that I see commercially is definitely, of course, the business aspect, the business case, whether your margins are right, do you have the right processes, can you get this done, can you scale? Those things are real. But in addition to that, what is it that makes you so unique? What are those moats? You know, can you build something around what you're doing that makes you so special, no one can turn you down, where you can walk into places with that as, you know, to lead the way into what you're doing. I think that is, to me, a very big part of de-risking as I go around and see what's out there. Fortunately for me, I've not run into things as much like what Tia is saying. And I've always seen things like there's no glass ceiling. It's my motto in life. And I've approached things like that. But you have to be agile and you have to move and, you know, go with the flow. Whatever it takes so that you can get to that next level. The mic is having some issues.
Brian, I know you have a lot of tools in the Morgan Lewis toolbox for de-risking. Can you talk about some of those tools?
Yeah, sure. It's an interesting way to kind of frame the question, right? You know, I wanted to build on the thought of problem solving, right? Part of what I see, and one of the things I love about working in the ecosystem is seeing the evolution of a founder as the company grows and seeing that founder grow. And part of the lingo you hear people say, you may hear or read, right, is flipping the switch to kind of the CEO, right? Founders sometimes start as a founder, right, a little bit green in some ways, but at some point they flip that switch and they're the CEO, right, and a company that's maybe a little bit more mature and more operations and more employees and more things they're dealing with. And they're solving, right? They're problem solving. That's what a CEO of any company has to do, of any size, right? So the sooner as a founder you can flip that switch to go to CEO role, right, from day one, the more chances of success you might have, right? So the more back to the Morgan Lewis question. At any day, right? I get a variety of questions on any given topic. I act as general counsel, right? So part of my job is being able to understand a broad array of things and identify. Thank you. Yeah, mic closer to my mouth. I tend to talk with a loud voice anyway. I could kind of skip the mic and just kind of talk, but thanks for the reminder. Right, I can send an email and within minutes I have someone responding, yes, how can I help, right? 2,000 lawyers at my back to do that work across every industry. So that's part of the tool. And the broader point there, right, is about collaboration, right? In any industry, in your own companies, the more you can collaborate and build a team and get different viewpoints, right? It's a way to de-risk everything because you have more eyes on it, you have more ears on it, you have more thoughts on it, and that always leads to the best answers, right? So the people, right, in terms of what tools do we have at Morgan Lewis? Yes, right, tons and lots of tools and background and knowledge, but it really comes down to the people, right, and the people willing to step up and help and answer anything, right, and jump in whenever we have to. And I think that's really the nature of success of any company or organization. Yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, yeah, I completely agree. I mean, I think it's an interesting point that you bring up, Brian, because one of the areas that I was remiss in mentioning in terms of kind of the startup failure rate and what contributes to that is the founding team, specifically the strength of the founding team. And so I think that's another important area to consider. Just curious, how has, to Tia and Kirthika, how has building a strong team been critical to de-risking your businesses?
It's night and day, absolutely, for us. So for instance, I'm in maternal health, which is a hard area to be in and to raise money. It's just reality. And I've been at this for a few years now, trying to look at it in different angles. How can we maneuver this? How can we navigate this landscape to do better? And I had an opportunity through the NIH to get in touch with Cigna. I wouldn't have been able to do this on my own. But long story short, through those meetings, I met someone, Danny Mendoza, who now I've brought on to our team as our Chief Growth Officer. And that has made such a huge difference, I can't tell you. Because there are certain doors that he's able to open, which I'm not able to open at all. It's more on the employer relationships, the benefit broker relationships. So really having a team equipped in the lane you're on is so critical. And at the same time, I've had team members who we thought would fit a certain role, but they didn't. And we had to sort of realign their role and realign what they would need to do. So you have to be very flexible. That's what I'm learning. This is a lot of learning at my end too. Don't put people into boxes and assume that that's what they will be doing. Be willing to move things so that you can go forward in your commercial journey or in de-risking, as you pointed out. And so you can raise and you can really grow this to be that next unicorn.
I would say make sure, to what she's saying, have the right team, and I'll give y'all a story behind that. So I was still living in Jersey, but working in Philly at Jazz Pharmaceuticals, trying to build LucasPye BIO up. And so at the time, it was supposed to go into Gary, Indiana, but that mayor lost the race. That mayor was crucial because she was the former assistant attorney general, whatever, of the state. She had connections to the Senate and the House, which is important for biotech because of the FDA regulations. So my team member chose to come to Philly and said, hey, PIDC is looking for somebody to take over Bartram Gardens. They want to get into life sciences, come pitch. So I came and pitched, but I had to kind of scramble, right, because I only had a certain amount of time. I don't have commercial development background. I'm not in real estate. I'm a scientist and an engineer. So I put this wacky team together. Somebody's going to tell on me one day, so I'm going to tell on myself. I put this wacky team together and came with some drawings, and we did the presentation. And it was okay, but it didn't stick, right? So that was before the pandemic, so let's just say that was 2019, right? Here we are, as of 3 weeks ago, I'm going to sit in the same building, in the same meeting room, in the same seat at PIDC, but this time I'm coming with a commercial development team, black owned. I'm also coming with Shapiro's cabinet members. That's a different conversation, right? So the outcome of this meeting was, oh yeah, we're going to meet next month, and by the way, the state may have some money for your land remediation, and then PIDC, yeah, we may have some stuff for you too. Also, PIDC renews my RACP grant, $2.5 million we got in 22, we can't use it until we build it, right, hard construction. But PIDC has been renewing the application for me every year, right? So these are the things about building the right teams, forming the right partnerships. Think somebody, what was that Ashley said about being religious about it. You know, people come up to me and say, Tia, you still trying to do that? I didn't even know that was still going on, right? But no, behind the scenes, I'm still moving forward and still building and still scaling until I get to my goal. So that's the mentality that you have to have, the right team in the right place. And don't be afraid to fire people, because after that first PIDC meeting, I fired everybody. Everybody was fired. Some of them still hit me up through LinkedIn talking about, hey, you still got it going on? I got some stuff for you. No, everybody's fired and they stayed out.
So you actually teed up the next area where I wanted to touch on, which is I read an article that talked about de-risking startups, and a couple of items that came up in the article were non-dilutive capital as a method for de-risking, and the other area was the largest client you can find. So what is, I think you touched on access to some capital. Was it non-dilutive? Were they grants?
Everything has been non-dilutive, from pitch competitions to grants to me throwing in most recently $15,000 out of my own pocket.
Mm-hmm. And Kirthika mentioned the NIH, the National Institute of Health, which I know is non-dilutive. So what are your thoughts on, and Brian, feel free to add, what are your thoughts on the impact of non-dilutive capital on helping to de-risk your business? And then you talked about the PIDC grants, which come over and over. I'm sorry, the contract that renewed, right? So you teed it up nicely for me. Just want to know what your thoughts are around, like, how impactful the non-dilutive capital and getting access to the right types of contracts is helping to reduce risk for you.
Go for it, Tia.
I was going to say, it's huge. I have to maximize that area. So unlike tech businesses, you kind of got to, with tech business, you got to kind of build the product and then have some customers at the same time at each stage, right? MVP, alpha, beta. You got to have customers each stage. A CDMO, I can't have a customer until I have a facility. Right? And the customer's not going to sign because I've tried, right? Until they see a sign that says this is the date, right? Because I can't have them miss their timeline to market for their particular product. So I had to take a step back, fire some more people, and focus on build this facility and get the right partners to help me build it. So when we get to the point where I can say, okay, we getting ready to start construction, then I can go back to fundraising and going after customers. By that time, I've de-risked it, right? We got a facility, we got construction. I did it all on non-dilutive funding. By that time, a VC, as long as I got some customers in the pipeline by that time, it should be a no-brainer, right? We're also going to be the only facility here in Philadelphia, as well as the state of PA, for biologics. So that's another advantage of making sure that you're in the right place at the right time. You also don't want to burn bridges for the investor that I told you earlier that gave it to me straight, right? So when I go back to them and say, hey, I got A, B, C, D in a row, we've already built a rapport. Throughout that time, over these course of these years, I kept them informed through what I call quarterly updates. Now, they are a pain to write every quarter. I'll admit, I don't write them on time all the time. But the point is, I get it out there so they can keep up with me so much. I don't know if he's still in here, he might have walked out. But I ran into some people here that I met years ago and asked me the same question. Oh, you still building that thing? Right? And then another one came up to me and said, yes, I get your quarterly updates. I read them every quarter. Keep it up.
So I can't say enough about how important it is to go after non-dilutive capital. Because as you know, there is the interest rate going up, interest rate going down, elections, there's like so many variables for investment, the investment climate. Like past few years have been really hard to raise external money. But what has really worked well is leaning on state resources, leaning on the SBIR, NIH. Though for us, it is really has been more of, say, the science that have put in the first check into us. New Jersey has funded us again and again, like repeated grants because they see our growth. That has truly helped us survive the tough times. So, and also hustling and going after every pitch competition, every open opportunity you can see. Nothing is too small. When you're an entrepreneur, nothing is too small because all of this is award money, drives up your credibility, drives up your cash flow, things that you need to do, more things in your business. And that's really what has helped Vital Start thrive. We've been able to do that quite successfully. And I think it has got us, through de-risking, driving traction, coming to a place. Now I can raise that round. I feel so much more confident that we'll be able to do this. And so I think it's important. And even to get that team, you need to overcome these initial hurdles to attract the right team. So for that, I strongly suggest the non-dilutive funding, and there's so many resources on that. One should be looking at that as an entrepreneur.
And that is the first thing angel investor or VC is going to ask you. How much money have you raised, and how much of it has been non-dilutive?
Yeah, so amazing points, right? Echo all that. Follow on onto the last two. Tia just shared another one, right, which is what a VC may ask you about. I want to come back to that in a second. So fundraising, right, capitalization, non-dilutive capital, right, to follow on to the point you were making about there's a lot out there and hustle that's exactly right. I would take an all of the above approach, right, on fundraising. As much non-dilutive as you can get, right? It's non-dilutive. Some obvious benefits there. Be aware, right, of strings attached to non-dilutive capital, right? In terms of government contracting, there's just some nuances, right? You're getting capital, but there's certain things that come along with it sometimes. And then to what's an investor going to ask about in the future, right? I have this conversation with kind of founders maybe once a week or so, right? When they're starting their first fundraising, or they're looking at something that's non-dilutive for the first time, which is project on day one, right? How much money do you think you need at these different stages to get to these different inversion points, and the financing, how you're going to do it, whether it be safes or notes or non-dilutive or pitch competitions or equity rounds, right? Model that all out from day one. Understand how you're going to end up at the end of the day after doing all that. It's going to be wrong, right? You're going to make adjustments to it as your company progresses. There's going to be assumptions that are wrong, right? But it's a worthwhile exercise just to understand what all these different financings are going to do to you and how you want to plan for it. Goes back to my earlier point about be strategic about everything, right? So all of the above, right, in terms of capital. Go for it all.
I love that, Brian. I mean, really, because I'm like, I never thought about modeling out, because this is an important point, because sometimes you can get carried away with the pitch competition. Some of us get carried away. And the payoff isn't there, right? And so would it hurt to model out, the ROI on all the pitch competitions, on all of the effort that goes into the grant writing and things like that? The important reason why I think you should track that behavior is you can put a kind of a stop limit on yourself for saying, you know what? I said I was going to do X amount of pitch competitions this year. I did X amount of pitch competitions. I didn't win any of those pitch competitions. Keep in mind the connections you make, because there's always an important value for getting up in front of people and pitching your idea, getting exposure, honing your craft, honing your message. So I don't want to discount any of that, but I think it's a good exercise, though, to consider modeling out what the impact is of all that work that you're doing. Because it doesn't mean it's for naught. I think the outcome of that could be that you say, you know what, I'm not good at grant writing. I'm not good at pitching. Maybe I'm the wrong person to pitch, right? So while you're seeking some of these non-dilutive strategies, it's important to realize when there are other resources that can come into play to help you. I'm going to shamelessly plug, because Kirthika mentioned the Science Center does have resources that are free to help people with grant writing, specifically with government grants and things like that. We're not the only ones in the city who do that, but there are resources to help you. And so if you find yourself like running in circles on some of these things, you do have to stop. And so I think what you mentioned, Brian, if you plan strategically for what you're going to accomplish, there's at least a moment in time when you stop to evaluate your plan and you say, you know what, this isn't working and I need to rethink the plan. So very important point. So I'm going to close with a call to what do you want to leave the audience with? What happens next? What should they do next? And then we're going to turn it over for Q&A.
Well, I would say that the ultimate thing, if you didn't listen to anything else that we said, I think the key thing that we talked about was you got to have a plan, right? You got to have a strategy. You got to take time out with your team. If it's 2 of y'all, 3 of y'all, I don't care, and go to a whiteboard and have a plan. When I talked about my story, when I told them with the PIDC the first time, we didn't have no plan. We just put something together based on what they told us that they wanted, and it didn't work out. And then the second go around, when I partnered with that commercial development team, or BAME, we sat down at a whiteboard at CIC and developed a plan 2 years ago. We also came up with a plan. We said, hey, we want to go after some government money. We had that conversation in June 22. By September, or whatever it was, October 22, we had $2.5 million in RACP funding. Nobody gets it on their first time applying. We did, because we had a plan. That's what I want to leave y'all with. Have a plan, even with spending the money. Don't go to these pitch competitions. Don't just go to Afrotech and all these little things to be high-fiving and partying with the celebrities that perform there. When you get the money, have a plan on how to use it, right? Eventually you have to stop and do what? Build a business.
What a great point. Seriously, that's a good one. I do want to carry on a little bit about that long game that Brian brought up. I think it's important to have a vision for that long game. You know, where are you headed? Part of the planning comes from that. And bring someone into your team, or have a consultant or somebody who's going to help you chart that business model and see that long game. Because I think that's very important. Because you start to understand where your business model really works well, in which segment, so you can, look at your commercial strategy with new set of eyes, and constantly keep learning. So maybe it's 2 points. One is think of the long game, and one is constantly keep learning. So definitely there is enough webinars and podcasts and things like that. NASDAQ has a really good one called the Milestone Makers that I really love. It's folks who have done this before who come on those webinars and actually talk of real things. It's amazing. So I highly recommend keep growing, don't lose heart. It's a long journey, it's the long game, but we can do this. If you're here and you're thinking that you are a founder, you got this.
I love the positivity, because that's exactly right. I think there's lots of good kind of themes or takeaways from the discussion, and thanks everybody. I really enjoyed it. Have a plan, play the long game, be strategic, be aggressive, and go after all of the above, right? So I would say, another actionable thing, right? Anyone, please, if we didn't, I would love to kind of talk to get some questions and a conversation a bit. So please, find me, reach out to me. I'm easy to find. If you need any help, I'm happy to act as a sounding board type of thing. So something very actionable there. And to that theme, right, of please feel free to reach out. It's build a team, right? Build with people. Leverage your ecosystem. I work with a lot of different people in the ecosystem and all these different organizations, and it is just astounding, right? The knowledge transfer, the free assistance, all the help that all of these organizations are out there. So just reach out to them. Don't be shy, and build your team and really leverage the people around you. Because again, it's about the people. The people you surround yourself with are going to really kind of lead to that success.
Thank you. So I definitely want to open it up for questions. I didn't see anything coming through on my text message, which is why I'm staring at my phone. Are there any questions in the audience? I see one in the back, and one over here. We'll get here, then here, right back there in the blue.
Hi guys, Dan Ruby here, founder of AfroGrow. Really glad just to hear you guys talk about your risk, especially from a team perspective. But wanted to get your thoughts on, obviously starting up and trying to get people to buy into the vision. As a founder, you, in a lot of cases, have to bring them on and give them certain types of equity and X, Y, Z. And a lot of times, you actually have to give out titles, right? Sometimes the titles might sound a little bit fancier than you really think they deserve, for lack of better words. But what if you get to a situation where, let's say, for example, after you launch the startup, right? For example, I always tell my team and say, hey, the work that we really have to do really comes after we truly launch this business. But in a situation where post-launch, you start to see that the level of energy from certain individuals, right, obviously not the entire team, is not necessarily there in terms of what you truly want. And now it's a situation of, well, this person has, a contract that says you have X amount of the company and you also have this great title. How do you go about, also from a legal perspective, in terms of managing that type of situation where you truly know, to your point, Tia, I just want to hire this person, but there's a little bit more at stake because that person was with you late nights 2 years ago trying to get this business up, but now that it's launched, they kind of just receded a little bit, from how they're, their efforts.
I mean, I always start with a conversation. Let's have a one-on-one conversation, coffee, lunch, whatever you want to have you, and listen more than talk. See what they're saying to you about what their issues may be or what may be going on. You never know. It might not be nothing with the job. It could be something personal that's causing them to slow down productivity for the company. And then always ask, have a conversation with your legal team if it does come to that about how to do that. But if you got a good legal team, they would have already built that in that contract when you brought that person on. That's why they talk about having co-founder agreements and all these different things. I learned the hard way myself. But one thing I always did was keep everything in writing. So that way we can't question about what was talked about, what was discussed, and what you're supposed to leave with. And if it comes to a point where, again, it should be built into the contract that they're going to leave with a little bit of equity, well, then you just got to eat it, right? That's a lesson learned for the next time. And then you know what to look for now that your business is at this particular stage versus then you're trying to get a team, you're trying to have faces, you're trying to have bodies, and you're trying to make sure that people can do what they say they can do versus post-launch, you know exactly what your business need based on customer feedback and everything that you're doing. So then you change your job description, and by that time, you'll be able to attract somebody with exactly what you want, now that you can actually pay them to work for you.
I'll just echo, get it in writing, right? So just to be succinct about it. Coming in the door and going out the door, right? There should be stuff there that you're signing. But we only have a couple minutes. We want to get to a bunch of questions. I'm happy to catch up with you on it. One point I did just want to kind of take away, because there was a lot to unpack there, which is the title of founder, right? Is to the officer position, CEO, president, CTO, CO, call them whatever you want. Give anybody any title you want, right? It doesn't make much of a difference. Officer titles, right? The controlling stockholder that controls the board appoints the officers. You can switch them out anytime. It's not a big deal. The title of founder is a little bit different, right? That gets a little bit more gray, and it's a little harder to take that founder title away from someone. They're founder, right? Even if they split from the company, officer titles you can take. So I did just want to hit on that one.
Okay, right over here.
Yeah, Rob Thomas, Launchpad Philly. I'm responsible for some of the up-and-coming entrepreneurs in the space. One of the things I was thinking about as we were going through this, we were talking about building a team, and then the strategic management of that team and strategic planning. So I think you have to take a step back. Like some of the kids I'm responsible for, they just graduated high school, so they can't pay a team yet. So where do they start? How do they get their start and say, hey, I know I need a strategic business partner. I know I need a strategic business planner. And I know I don't have all the technical aptitude to build my thing, but I got to pay all these people. So where do they start?
Great question. So this is a different company I have, a genomic software company that I'm building as we speak. None of us are paid, right? And I'm not a tech person. I don't know the code. I don't know dot, dash. I don't know none of that crap. And so what I had to do was reach into my network and figure out who can help me. So I got a co-founder, but her background is similar to mine in clinical research recruitment, which we need is genomics, right? But we needed a tech person. I'm still looking for a CTO, anybody out there? But what I had to do was go into my network, and so I met with an executive that had just left Comcast, and she recommended me to different individuals to speak to figure out who can possibly help me. So we had to contract a coding team. Another person we was introduced to, we're licensing software from. I met him at a conference similar to this, word of mouth. And so then we formed a strategic partnership for me to license his software. Now, when I say license, I'm saying it very loosely right now, right? Because he's not getting paid for this license. We have that written, documented, in an MOU that until we hit a certain milestone, we'll discuss to see what those fees are. It's the same thing with bringing people on the team. You got to be at conferences like that, have that conversation, and figure out who's on board with your mission, who's on board with your passion for that company. And then if that don't work out, then you figure out how you're going to scrounge up some money. But that's how you spend that money smartly with the pitch competitions and grants. You may not be able to give them a full salary, but you may be able to pay them for hours on consulting.
Very quick comment. Agree with everything Tia brought up here. There are enough resources in the city. I feel like there's Mentor Connect programs, there's accelerator programs, programs, and so many others that you can go to just form that network, find that person with whom you have that affinity, who can see your vision and hopefully work with you for some time. And then you can think about equity and things like that. That's why there is equity. Equity is a tool that you have to really attract top talent. So don't use it very easily. You have to be very conservative about it. But that is a big tool that you have. If you have that $100 million idea, there will be people who want to work with you on it.
And you can split the equity up where they don't get it up front. So they work over a certain amount of time or hit a certain amount of milestones, they get more equity even though they don't have a salary to match at that time.
I would say, and for the, I mean, right now is the most exciting time to be a solo entrepreneur, so thanks for hitting on it, right? We talked a lot about teams, but yeah, right, a lot of people are building solo. People are going to 1 million AAR, right, by themselves, a 1-2-person team, so it's not to be kind of poo-pooed, right? But I would say take strategic pauses, right? There's gonna be times you can build yourself, there's gonna be other times it makes sense to take a minute and talk to a professional, right, and, or a partner, someone you trust, right, a community builder, and just make sure you're going the right way, right, about whatever you're doing.
Thank you, Brian, Tia, and Kirthika, so much for your time. Let's give everybody a round of applause.